Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started right at 6 o'clock. Good evening and welcome to our Legacy Parent Academy. My name is Ann McHale Miller and I'm the coordinator of social work services. This year, each of our Legacy Parent Academies are in webinar format and are an hour in length. The recording will be made available for those that missed tonight's live presentation on our Legacy Parent Academy webpage by the end of the week, and will also be available in multiple languages for translation. A copy of the presentation materials will also be posted online, and this particular presentation actually includes some supplemental materials that the presenters and panelists put together for you if you have additional interest in the topic or want more information. We invite those in attendance this evening to use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen for questions. Your questions are super important to us, and we have reserved time at the end of the presentation to address them. Any questions that may require additional research or that we don't get to, we will certainly post later on that Legacy Parent Academy webpage as well. So tonight our topic is recognizing and responding to stress and trauma, and we have a wonderful group of Katy ISD counselors that are here to present to you. So our panelist this evening is Alejandra Paez, counselor at Memorial Parkway Elementary, Penny Flores, counselor at Bryant Elementary, Miss Kelly Price, counselor at Exley Elementary, and also want to mention Yanira Uresti, who is our lead counselor at Stockton Junior High. She was a part of this group and putting it together, but she had a crisis come up with one of her students, and so she is doing what counselors do, which is taking care of students and families as we speak this evening, but wanted to mention her as well. It's important to note that all the panelists are also advanced certified trauma and resilience practitioners. So they've all taken coursework and training through Star Commonwealth to achieve that certification. So with that being said, thank you again for being here this evening. And Alejandra, I'll send it to you and share my screen.
Thank you, Ann. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight, attending another Legacy Parent Academy. Our goal today is that by the end of this presentation, you will be able to define both stress and trauma and differentiate between the two. We also want you to understand how trauma impacts our children and their learning. Just remember, a brain under stress or trauma cannot learn. We want you to be able to support behavior and academic success. And we want you to understand the important role that self-care plays when talking about trauma and stress-related issues. Stress and trauma-informed practices acknowledge and address the social emotional needs of all the school stakeholders, which in turn leads to a positive, productive school experience, which is exactly what we want for all our students here in Katy ISD. So we're gonna start by defining what is stress. Stress is an experience that impacts our lives. The first thing we all need to know and understand is the stress is part of our everyday life. So we all have stress in our lives every single day, all the time. It's happening. So what is stress? Stress is a physical, mental, or emotional response to a specific event or an overwhelming situation. Normally, in normal circumstances, there is a balance between your brain, and our body. The brain works and sends signals to our body, and the body responds. Stress is anything that has the potential to upset or break that balance that we have between our brain and our body. Stress can be good or can be bad. Okay, we need to understand there is good stress and there is bad stress. We need some sort of stress in our lives all the time. Stress will help us get up in the morning, you know, that adrenaline that when you get up in the morning, it helps you move, it helps you keep going. Stress can help us stay focused, learn, and even remember new things, but only when it is a stress that is the good type of stress, okay? Stress can be good and can be positive. How can that be? You may ask yourself, well, how is stress gonna be good? Well, it is. Imagine the stress that we do or that we feel when we do things for entertainment, like when you go to an amusement park and you choose to go in a roller coaster, or you choose to go in one of those boat rides or stuff like that. When you are going into the roller coaster and you are going up, 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 you know what is coming. You know that you're gonna be falling down, and that creates a hole in your stomach, and is stressful when you are going up in that roller coaster. But that's a positive stress. That's a good stress. That's entertainment. Another example of a good stress can be when you're watching a sports game, you're watching your favorite team on TV or in the stadium. You go to a football game or to a soccer game, and you see almost at the end your team is winning, but they are pretty much tied and anything can happen. That's a very stressful situation at that moment, and you are like biting your fingernails, what's going to happen? But it's also a good stress. A scary movie, when you go to watch a scary movie, if you like scary movies, I personally don't, but some people like to watch scary movies, and that's very stressful. And that's something that you are enjoying while it's happening. And then when it's over, it's like, okay, you release, you kind of, okay, that's it, it happened. So that's a good stress. It's something, it's just one event, one situation. It happens, then it goes down, you go back to normal, and you keep going. It's like you forget about it. We all enjoy that type of stressful situation because it's positive, because it's something that is just exactly that, is entertainment, okay? That's part of our everyday. Another part of our everyday stress is like when you're going to work and you get into traffic, you know that it's going to happen, you know that it's going to be a lot of cars, you know that you may get a little bit more or less traffic in the morning or in the afternoon going back home, but you're counting on it. It's kind of stressful, yes. You don't like it, maybe not, but you know what to expect, and you know it's gonna end, and you know you're gonna get back home or you're gonna make it to work, and everything is gonna be okay. Now, there is also a negative type of stress, a bad stress. This is what happens when the stressants stay in your body for a longer period of time. For example, when you're constantly working on a very bad, stressful conditions, like you don't want to get up in the morning, you don't want to go to work. I know that my boss is going to be there, he's going to be waiting for me, he's going to tell me again what I did. And, it's that things that is happening again and again and again that it doesn't let you go, it doesn't let you continue moving forward. Or now with the COVID, let's say I lost my job during COVID, maybe in the spring or in the summer, and I haven't been able to get a job. I've been called to interviews, but I haven't been able to get that job. And I know that my bills are coming. I know I need to pay my rent. I know I need to pay my electricity, all my bills, and they are accumulating. And I'm trying to count the pennies to pay whatever I can, but I know that they're going to accumulate again next month. That's a very stressful situation, and it's not a good stress because it's constantly in your brain. That's the one that is affecting your brain, and is the one that is causing the pain. That causes different reactions in your body. So that's when the system gets to work in a different way. This type of stress sometimes is the one that doesn't let you sleep at night, and that's not healthy. It doesn't let you eat well because it affects your digestive system. It affects your nervous system. It may affect your relationship with others. It's like you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But eventually, you know that that light is there, and you're going to get, and you're going to pass it, and it's all going to happen. Nonetheless, this is the negative type of stress that we want to avoid, and that we don't want to have. Normally, stress is not harmful, while trauma usually is. On the next slide, you have some pictures that are basically examples of different type of situations that are very stressful for some people. Remember, each one of us is completely different. Our bodies react in a different way. Maybe what is stressful for me, it may not be stressful for you. Imagine your child is going into a test in first grade and is going to do additions, one digit from 1 to 10. For you, that's super easy. You say, well, that's easy. You got this. You have practice. We have done counters. We have done this. We have done that. It's going to be okay. But for your child, it may not be that easy because he's the one into that situation. So it's very important for you to acknowledge what your child is going through. These stressful situations are affecting him, are affecting his stomach, or or he may have headaches, or he may have some other reactions, and they are very true, they are happening. It's just because of a test that for you may be so easy, but for him or for her are different. So we need to acknowledge that the stress is there, that it exists, that is real, and is happening. And we just need to try to help the kids, our children, with some tools and some coping mechanisms that Kelly will talk about it later when we talk about how to take care of ourselves. Okay, self-care is very important in here. The next picture in there is when imagine you are receiving a phone call, you are at work and you receive a phone call from the school. In my mind, personally, when I receive a phone call from the school, it's like, uh-oh, what did my child do this time? What trouble did she get in? So it's like, okay, do I answer? I don't want to answer. I don't want them to tell me, but I need to answer. Those few seconds while you decide that you need to answer the phone anyway because the school is calling you, those are very stressful. But that depends also on your child. It might be that your child fell down in the playground and he went to the nurse and you need to go pick him up. I mean, something like that. The other picture in this graph is if you go to a job interview. That's a very stressful situation when you are sitting down in a table in front of several people that are asking you questions and they want to know everything about you, and you want to give your best answers, and you want a job, but sometimes you don't know how you're going to react. That's a very stressful situation. That's an emotional and stressful situation. My last picture is when you receive a note from the school. It could be a detention note, it could be that a behavior note, or it could be something happened today in the cafeteria. So it's like, okay, I got a note, or your child comes here, I need to show you a note, something happened in school today, and you start like sweating your hands, what happened, what's gonna happen, what are the consequences. So this is normal type of stress that happens to us every day, that happens on every different situation. And depending on the person, it may be what you may react one way or another, and it may affect you differently from another person, but it affects our lives. On the next slide, you can see the picture of a brain in the two different types of stress that we have. We have two different types of stress that affect our brain. The first is the acute stress that is related to a specific event or one situation. The second picture is the chronic brain picture. This is a repeated exposure to events that release stress hormones in your body. Okay, so on the acute stress, you see that this something happened, something sudden, something threatening. It could be, I don't know, something that just happened. Okay, so you see that in the brain, there is like a smoke alarm that is just beeping, and it just sends this signal, alarm, 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 danger, 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 something is happening. So you see all these red areas in the brain. This is the alarm. It triggers, the stress triggers that alarm in your brain. And what that brain does is just that gets all red, get all altered somehow, and it sends signals to your body. So your body will react. On the chronic stress, you see that there is still some red, the alarm keeps ringing, but the brain gets somehow used to that alarm and start suppressing some areas, like tearing apart. Like, okay, I'm not going to be bothered with this anymore because what else can happen? You know, it's like when you are giving up type of thing. So the brain start kind of not disappearing, but some parts get like, okay, I'm not going to respond to this again. It's like gets tired, gives up kind of situation. On the next slide, you see then the stress response system. This is how we respond to stress situation. We saw the brain. We saw that there is an alarm that activates in your brain, and then the brain sends the signal to your body, stimulating your nervous system. That nervous system causes the release of adrenaline into your bloodstream. And that adrenaline start causing some responses as well. Like your heartbeat starts increasing and you feel like it's gonna get out of your chest. Your blood pressure can get high. Your digestive system actually decreases. Sometimes you cannot eat, you cannot smell food. I cannot swallow anything because I'm gonna throw up. You know, that type of, it affects on your stomach, on your whole digestive system. You become more sensory, you have more sensory perception. That means that you become more aware of your surroundings, what is happening all around you, things that normally you may not pay attention to. You start like, oh, this is happening. It's like an alert on everything that is around you. And it increases your metabolism as well. As a consequence of all these responses in your body, the final mental reaction of our body to all this situation, all this stress, is that the body either fight, flight, or freeze. What this means is that, for example, imagine you are in a convenience store and someone comes in with a gun and is attacking the cashier. Okay, give me all the money. You are in there and you're watching. Nothing is happening to you, okay? But you may decide as a response, and this is just know that this is totally uncontrollable. This is something that you are not in control of. It's a 1 second decision that you just react. It's just that, it's a reaction. You may decide to go to that guy with a gun and fight him because that's your response. Or you may decide, oh, I see a gun, I just better get out of here. And you take off, run through the door and get out of there. You don't even try to call 911. You just run away from that situation. That's it. Or you can freeze. It had happened to me several times that I'm in a place and something is happening. Oh, I was there, I saw what happened, and I could not even move. I could not talk. I could not say anything or do anything. I was frozen. These are reactions to a situation. And those are not reactions that you can predict, that you're gonna say, if I see a robbery happen in a convenience store, I'm gonna call 911 immediately. You may not even think about that at that moment. That depends on your reaction. One day can be fight, another time can be flight, and another time can be just freeze. So stress is anything that life brings our way, and that thing has the potential to upset the balance between our brain and our body. The thing with the stress is that normally it's not harmful. It happens, it just becomes, it increases your adrenaline in the body, and then when it's over, it all goes down and it passes, and that's it. It's gone, it's over. With trauma, most of the time, there is harmful effects. And now I'm gonna leave you with Penny, and Penny's gonna talk and explain to you what trauma is and how it works.
And understanding that stress response system is an important part of trauma, because a lot of the time when trauma is triggered, that stress response system is going to take over. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's start with, what is trauma? What is trauma? Trauma is any experience that leaves a person feeling hopeless, helpless, fearing for their own life, survival, or safety. We use the term trauma to describe an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that are experienced as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening. Now, it's important to understand that experiences can be real. The trauma could have been real, but it could have also been perceived. And that perception is very important because they're perceiving that threat, and it can create a traumatic event for them. Trauma overwhelm, it also experiences can be a one-time incident or a chronic state of life. Trauma overwhelms our ability to cope and has lasting adverse effects on a person's mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Immediate reactions to traumatic events include feelings of fear, helplessness, and loss of control. Traumatic experiences can have short-term and long-term effects on health and well-being, and can even alter how your youth views themselves, others, and the world around them. These experiences may also challenge their belief that the world is a safe place. Even though we might be providing a safe place for them, that perception that the world is not a safe place may exist due to the traumatic event, that other people can't be trusted, and that they are not worthy of care and protection. Students feeling the effects of trauma may show up in their work and behavior at school. So it's important to understand what trauma is. On the next slide, what you're going to see are some examples of the experience of trauma to kind of try to relate to what trauma could be. So as you know, whether an event or circumstance is traumatic depends on the person's experience of the event. We cannot say that a particular situation, witnessing violence, or, for example, is always traumatic for everyone. Whether an event is experienced as traumatic is influenced by a lot of different factors, including our internal coping resources, our external supports, and broader community, such as cultural and societal factors that shape how we understand and respond to our experiences. Traumatic events that students face at school or in their families or in communities come in many different forms and range from one-time incidents such as an accident, a natural disaster, the loss of a parent or peer, or a single experience of violence, to chronic experiences that are chronic or even generational, such as abuse, neglect, chronic bullying, exposure to a family or community violence, or historical pattern of poverty, racism, or discrimination. As you can see in the pictures, these experiences of trauma, what I wanted to do is to be able to relate to different things that you might experience and then explain how it relates to trauma. If you've ever been in a car accident, you know that initial feeling after you've been in the car accident where you don't know how to react. You're kind of in that fight or flight, that sensory experience that Alejandra from the sensory response, that how Alejandra explained, that initial reaction to the accident. But trauma is the next time you're getting into the car and those same feelings are triggered in you again. That's trauma. Or the experience of Harvey might have affected you, and the next time it rains, you are experiencing those effects again. Or a collective experience of COVID-19 and injustice. On the next slide, what you're going to see are that there are different types of trauma. When we think of the experience of trauma, we often think of three different types of trauma. First is acute trauma. This is an event that occurs at a particular time and place and is usually very short-lived, such as a natural disaster, an accident, a sudden loss, or a one-time experience of violence. Now, even though those are acute traumas, they experience them at one particular time. As you can see, those can have long-term effects. Chronic trauma, though, are experiences that occur repeatedly over long periods of time, such as chronic abuse or neglect, ongoing community violence, long-term illness, or chronic homelessness. Finally, we have historical trauma. This is the collective and cumulative trauma experienced by a particular group across generations still suffering those effects, such as violent colonization, assimilation policies, slavery, segregation, racism, or discrimination. Common reactions for children and adolescents that educators notice immediately following a traumatic event include reactions to trauma-related triggers. How well a child is able to bounce back from these experiences is influenced by a combination of individual and environmental risk and protective factors, and the complex interactions among these factors as children move through different stages of development. Individual and environmental factors that influence a child's response to trauma and risk for mental health issues like post-traumatic stress disorder include biological characteristics, family relationships, cultural belief systems, social support networks, including schools and community level experiences. Now, I kind of want to explain how trauma works, like that stress response system, we've talked about it, but I want to kind of explain how it works. So when an individual becomes triggered by trauma, their brain is typically, before experiencing trauma, the brain works together, right? But when the brain is triggered by trauma, their brain becomes functioning from just the sensory brain, those two parts of the brain. They're no longer working together. So though they normally work together, if an individual is experiencing trauma, this part of the brain, the amygdala, that usually works, right? That usually works with that smoke signal, that smoke alarm, that sends off that smoke alarm to say something's wrong. It stops working, and the sensory brain starts to kind of take over. And so what the sensory brain is it takes over and it's just working from the senses. So let me kind of explain it. Say it's cold outside. And when the two brains are typically working together, you would say, I'm going to go get a jacket. But when that sensory brain is just working, they think, okay, it's cold, I need ice cream, right? It doesn't make sense to us, but we're functioning just from the sensory brain. It's not really going to make sense. We're just trying to feel that sense of safety and calmness again. So having a response to trauma creates this type of a response. On the next slide, you're going to see that there's several different reactions to trauma that you may see. Right? The majority of school age, and I'm going to hit you with the facts, right? The majority of school-aged youth have been or will be exposed to at least one potentially traumatic event, including experiencing a traumatic event directly, witnessing the event, or hearing about the event that affects maybe a student that they know, or a peer that they know, or a friend. Whether these experiences happen at home, in the community, or at school, the effects of trauma can be felt in all those facets. As children are exposed to more traumatic experiences, the negative impact on social and academic success becomes more pronounced. And students exposed to trauma may have some of these symptoms. Physical symptoms such as headaches, stomach aches, poor appetite, and a decline in self-care. You wouldn't think of stomach aches or headaches as a symptom of trauma, but it could be. It could be manifesting in that way. It could include intense feelings of fear, anxiety, and even a concern for their safety. Difficulty identifying how they are feeling and controlling their emotional reactions. Remember, they're functioning from that sensory brain. They may only be able to use their behavior as a form of communication because they're not able to express what it is that they're feeling. So they're using their behavior as a form of communication. We have to hear that. It could be angry or aggressive outbursts. It could be a desire to withdraw from peers and adults, just needing some personal time. It could be a tendency to engage in risk-taking behaviors, or it could have trouble trusting adults and peers, reading some social cues, and especially building relationships. On the next slide, what you're going to see is that trauma affects learning and behavior. Depending on the age and stage of the onset of trauma, a child's brain development, memory, narrative, and verbal capacities will all be affected, as well as the child's opportunities for recovery. The consequences of traumatic events are highly likely to derail a child's healthy biological, emotional, cognitive, and social development. In other words, students may have difficulty paying attention and learning. Symptoms resulting from trauma can directly impact a student's ability to learn. Think about it, a student might be triggered by a traumatic event is going to have a hard time hearing that math lesson or hearing you ask to clean their room, right? So students might be distracted by intrusive thoughts about the event that prevent them from paying attention in class, studying, doing well on a test, or making rational decisions. Exposure to violence can disrupt the youth's ability to relate to others and to successfully manage their emotions. This can lead to poor behavior, which could result in decreased IQ, a decreased reading ability, reduced instructional time, and suspensions or expulsions. Long-term results, those long-term results of exposure to trauma and violence could include joblessness, reduced graduation rates, poverty, lower grade point averages, and increased incidences of teen pregnancy. And if you're like me, we don't want that for our children. We don't want that. So on the next slide, what you're going to see is there are actually things that we can do to start to build things within our kids so that if they experience a traumatic event, they're able to kind of bounce back at a quicker rate. So we're going to start with understanding Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's in what Maslow's hierarchy needs, there's 5 levels of needs, and the lowest level of needs have to be met before we can progress upwards. So those physiological needs of air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, all of those needs need to be met before we can even get to the higher levels. As you can see, those safety needs have to be met before we can ask for love and belonging, those relationships, for esteem, or even self-actualization, the desire to become the most that they can be. Without those safety needs being met, when what traumatic events do is they kind of take away that safety, that sense of safety. So without those safety needs being met, you can't progress up the tiers to be able to tap into more than just them feeling safe. It's important to understand that trauma can impact people differently, and how they react or how they're able to bounce back is determined by several different things. On the next slide, what you're going to see is that there are some protective factors that if our students have, it helps to kind of mitigate the traumatic experiences. I want you to think of it this way. Have you ever known 2 children who have been through the same experience but don't share the same behaviors, where one might be thriving and the other is just struggling? Like when I think of this, I think of Elsa and Anna from Frozen, right? Both experience the same thing, but very different outcomes. You may wonder why one person is more directly affected by the experience than the other person. Much of this is determined by the severity, length, and types of exposure. However, it is also determined by the number of protective factors a child has in his or her life. Protective factors help a child feel safe more quickly after experiencing trauma and can help to neutralize those physical changes that naturally occur during and after trauma. If these major systems, though, are impaired either before or after the trauma, then the risk factor for developmental problems is much greater. It's important to note that if our children have protective factors in their life, these act as like a shield against trauma. Each person's response to trauma or chronic stress can be different. Protective factors can help mitigate the trauma's impact on the individual. Relationships, y'all, relationships are the #1 factor in building resilience. And resilience is one of the #1 protective factors to mitigate trauma. Some other protective factors worth noting are a family environment that is supportive and naturally nurturing. Dependable and stable family relationships. Those family relationships are huge, as well as the relationships they build outside of the family as well. Parents and caregivers who display appropriate and healthy affection, caring adults outside of the family who serve as role models or mentors, and household rules and monitoring of the child. There are lots of different protective factors, but those are the ones within our control. Those are the ones that we can really put into place. And the good news is, on the next slide, what you're going to see, when I first saw this slide of what acute stress and chronic stress can do to our brains, I was like, oh my goodness, that's just terrible. But the good news is that our brains can be rewired, right? Can be restructured through positive experiences. The mental structures in our brain are open to change throughout the lifespan because of neuroplasticity. Healing can be induced through consistent is a keyword, attuned communication within the context of the most important relationships in a child's life. Think of it this way. Children who have been harmed in the context of a relationship can only be healed in a relationship. You will never truly change a child's heart without first establishing a relationship of trust and unconditional acceptance. Healing can begin through safe, predictable environments. Healing can be done by building resilience. And resilience can be built by teaching social and emotional skills. There's lots of things that we can do to build protective factors in order to mitigate trauma. And I'm going to pass it over to Kelly, who's going to give you a little bit more information on what we can do to see a change.
All right, thank you, Penny. So now that we know more about stress and trauma and how it can affect our children physiologically and physically, we can now begin to shift our mindsets and our practices to reflect what is in the best interest of our children. We're able to take time and view through the lens of our children and reflect how can we use their behavior as a form of communication to let us know what is happening. So on this next slide, you're going to see how KDISD, how we've taken a stance, and we've also shifted our mindset a little bit. Because just to give you some context, trauma-informed care and practices have gained a lot of attention from the education system, and now it is mandated by legislation that we train and incorporate these practices into our schools by both House Bill 1118 and Senate Bill 11. As a district, KDISD has 118 Level 1 and 82 Level 2 advanced certified trauma practitioners serving in roles such as counselors, LSSPs, and social workers. As a result of House Bill 18 and Senate Bill 11, KDISD staff have also received training in the fall of 2020 on trauma-informed practices and how being trauma sensitive can better serve our students and our families. KDISD has implemented a new character education and social emotional learning curriculum known as Character Strong and Purposeful People. This research-based curriculum offers practical, innovative resources to help improve school culture to create and build positive habits through consistent, intentional practice. So now let's look at what you can do as a parent. If you are a parent of a child who has experienced trauma or is experiencing significant stress, you can respond by creating a nurturing and responsive environment, extending a loving touch while allowing for open communication, creating a safe and predictable environment. The absence of surprise will not only bring comfort to your child, but also to you as well. Help your child manage their emotions and promote self-regulation. Look through the lens of your child. Try to see what they're seeing and feel what they're feeling as they process their emotions. And who can you contact? Well, contact your school's counselor to support your child. Our KDISD counselors are trauma trained, and we're able to provide you with resources if you desire. All right, so now we're going to look at the role of self-care. We're going to look inward because you know why? It's important to take care of ourselves. Parenthood can be rewarding, but is it ever busy? Between taking children to school and managing other to-dos, some days it may feel like you don't get a minute to yourself. And even when you hear about self-care, you may dismiss it as frivolous, unnecessary, or even selfish. Given the stress of recent months with COVID-19 and the resulting economic situation, as well as the recent emotional national discussion regarding the justice system, we are all in need of some additional help with self-care. Self-care has everything to do with health and wellness. In fact, self-care can be one of the best ways for you as a parent to not only meet your needs, but also to meet your family responsibilities. Imagine if you broke your leg or came down with the flu. Would you try to brush it off and deny yourself treatment? Of course not. Most of us would go to the doctor or treat minor injuries as they happen. Emotional and mental health, as well as everyday physical health practices, are just as important. Self-care is a great way for caregivers to make sure their own needs are being met. Once you view self-care through the right lens, it's easy to see that it's the first step to supporting ourselves and our children as they cope with stress and or trauma. So the QR code on this slide will take you to a presentation with some intentional practical applications of self-care. And on this following slide, in addition to the supplemental slides that we give you in the QR code, I want you to see these 3 examples of apps that can be used to aid in self-care. Super Better builds resilience, the ability to stay strong, motivated, and optimistic, even in the face of change and difficult challenges. Playing Super Better unlocks heroic potential to overcome tough situations and achieve goals that matter most using a video game style delivery. AlloBud is a self-care app that's available through the App Store, and it brings awareness to self-care activities using encouraging push notifications throughout the day. Happify uses science-based activities and games to assist in reducing stress, working to overcome negative thoughts, and help build greater resilience. So just remember that you taking care of you is just as important as taking care of your children. A dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. And at this time, we will begin answering questions in the chat.
And ladies, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat thus far, but let's see if anyone, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A section. Let's see if anyone has anything last minute. Otherwise, we'll kind of wrap up. I know it's a busy evening for everyone. We have the bond committee meeting. We have several different departments that are doing presentations. So it's a busy night in KDISD, which is why we record these and post them to our website. So we encourage you to share that with your friends and other parents at your child's school. Oh, I said enough to get one to post. Mr. Rhodes, we very much agree, sir. Miss Flores is amazing. It is a statement. It's a great statement, as is Miss Paez and Miss Price and Miss Uresti, who can't be here. Great. Thank you guys for being here. We'll hang around for a couple seconds, but we really appreciate your attendance and your time. And again, encourage you to visit that website to get additional information if you are interested. All right, ladies, I think we are good to go. If any of the remaining attendees have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. All of our information is available on the KDISD website, or reach out as well to your child's campus counselor. We appreciate you being here, and let us know how we can support you and your child. Our next Parent Legacy Academy, or Legacy Parent Academy, will be in February, so be on the lookout for that on destigmatizing mental health. And we thank you for joining us, and have a great evening. Oh, Ms. Flores.
There is a question that you suggest counseling in the chat, and suggest counseling for what?
Well, I think, and it may be, so I think the first step would be, I recognize that this is a problem, right? Or that this could be something potentially that my child is going through. I think the first step is contacting your school counselor, right? Most of the school counselors are trauma level either 1 or 2 certified. So they're going to be able to help you through that process. Yes, definitely. If it's a fear of bullies, I would say that first line of defense, or that first line of communication, would be to contact the school counselor. They're going to be able to help you with some resources and be able to help you understand the situation. Does anybody recommend anything different?
No, that's the recommendation, I think. I think you're absolutely right. If it's just a fear of bullies, the school counselor definitely will be the first point of contact, because you don't know if the child is being bullied or not, or if just the fear of maybe have seen it with someone else, or maybe had hear about it but doesn't know exactly what it is. So yes, our suggestion will be talk with your school counselor and try to figure out why is that fear going on.
Yes.
Thank you, Ortiz, for your question. So the next question is, my child has been bullied at school. Should we look for outside of school counseling? I think it depends on the severity of the impact. Yes, like I said, that school counselor, I would reach out to them first just to see what they would recommend as well. But I think honestly, as a parent, if you're feeling like this is impacting your kid at such a great level, that looking at outside counseling wouldn't hurt, right? But the school counselor will be able to kind of point you into a referral, like what are some referrals that they might be able to provide too. We have a list of referrals that we could help with as well. So definitely, I would just say step one is school counselor. If you don't feel comfortable with that, outside counseling could be an option as well. You're going to know your kid best. If you feel like it's really impacting them at a great level, as a parent, I would say go for every resource you can. Like if you are able to provide outside counseling, go for it. But if you're just wanting to be curious and to know, here's the specific situation that my kid's going through, I say reach out to that school counselor. She can point you in the right direction.
Also, we want to ensure that your child feels safe at school. So communicating any concerns you have or anything that may be going on so that we can ensure that your child feels safe if it's another peer or whatnot. We want to ensure their safety at school. So there are things that the counselor and administrators can do to investigate and consider how to make your child feel safe at school.
And I just want to add, we need to know when something like this is happening, because there is no way for us to help the student that is not reporting something that is happening to him or her. If we don't know that is happening, if the child doesn't speak or the parents do not let us know what is happening, we cannot help them and we cannot support and we cannot send the information that we need to send to you or help the students.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ortiz, for sharing and sharing, being vulnerable and sharing what's going on, and let us know how we can help you and your kiddo for sure. Okay, every time I try to close us out, we get a question. And I don't want to dismiss any questions. Okay. Once again, if you guys, if you need anything, please, our information and email is always available on the KDISD website, but we encourage you to reach out specifically to your campus administrator, campus counselor for any support that you may need. Again, this is recorded and it will be posted to the Legacy Parent Academy webpage with our next presentation in February on destigmatizing mental health. Thanks so much for joining us this evening and have a great night. Thanks, panelists.